So, a lot of independent authors have questions about how they should interact with independent bookstores. We do too. So, we asked an independent bookstore. We have with us today Shaunty McMillain from Golden Leaf Books out of New York. And we're going to ask some questions that a lot of authors have had and hopefully get you some advice on how you should interact with independent bookstores and hopefully be able to strengthen that relationship. So, Shaunty, welcome. Um, so, first question, and we'll just start with the big one right off the back. What is the number one thing you see people get wrong when trying to approach an independent bookstore?
So the biggest thing that I see is not having the book available for independent bookstores to purchase. Independent bookstores need wholesale discounts in order to be able to operate. Basically, if I were to buy a book off Amazon and then turn around and sell it at retail, well, retail is what Amazon charged me. So if I buy it retail and sell it retail, I'm not making any profit. I have no way to pay the bills and the rent and the lights and all of that fun stuff in order to keep my space open for my customers and my community to be able to shop with me.
Okay. Beatrice, I jump in here at any time because I know you have asked a lot of these questions already.
I have indeed. I have them in my brain.
Go for it.
Well, one of the things, and this is obviously for the US specifically because we operate on the US, but what are some things that you can recommend people that you recommended me, honestly, whether they're setting their books on Ingram for like it to be available to be purchased wholesale?
Yeah, so IngramSpark is the platform that most indie authors use in order to be able to work with independent bookstores. I believe Barnes and Noble also orders indie authors, usually through IngramSpark. I've heard a few indie authors say that they've been able to get on Barnes and Noble shelves via Barnes and Noble's publishing platform. But it's far more common to hear about Barnes and Noble purchasing through IngramSpark as well. So that's one big win for IngramSpark is that it's also a way to get into Barnes and Noble shelves, even though they're not actually independent. And with IngramSpark, part of the issue is that we are again getting the wholesale pricing. So authors do see lower royalties as a result because when we go through Amazon to purchase and then sell directly to print and sell directly to the customer, that's one less middleman essentially, right? Whereas with IngramSpark, the author goes, uploads their book to IngramSpark, and then Ingram distribution, which is a separate wing, that's the wing that I work with and actually purchase from. Um, then there's me actually hand selling the book to a customer in my store. The idea is that it is less work for the author per copy of the book sold, right? Because you don't have to be in my store handing it to people, telling people, buy my book, buy my book. You don't have to be there doing that. And you're not necessarily the one that is like driving people to my store. That's me and my marketing for my store that brings people in. So that's kind of the benefit that you're seeing from that lower cost. It's essentially like a marketing fee, right? Is how I would
Hmm.
look at it if I were an indie author. But what that means is that there's two major settings for indie authors to be aware of that bookstores are going to be looking at. The first one is going to be the wholesale discount that you set. In Ingram's interface, they give you the ability to do a sliding scale discount. And I want to say it starts at 35% and goes up to 55%
Hmm.
when you are an indie author looking at it. What isn't clear from Ingram's interface is that they are not giving that entire discount to the indie bookstore. They take an additional chunk out of that. So if indie authors are setting that discount to 55%, we are only seeing about 40% typically. Now, that varies because different bookstores have different contracts with Ingram based on the volume that they do, but that's probably about the average discount that the bookstore is seeing if you set it to 55%. Um, and that is a low wholesale discount for most industries. Bookstores have lower discounts than the average industry. Like my high-end discount is like 50%. I've talked to people that do like metaphysical stores and they're shocked because that is lower than the discounts that they've seen for their stuff ever. And so it is a slim margin for us. And sometimes we aren't able to afford if it goes lower than that. And because Ingram has higher printing fees, that can also mean that the numbers just don't work out based on the number of pages in the book, the size of the book, the paper quality chosen, like all of those factors come together. And sometimes it doesn't make sense for an indie author to actually put their book in stores because the numbers just don't work. We're businesses on both sides, right? Indie authors are a business, indie bookstores are a business, and we're both trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. And that is actually one of the hardest problems. So indie authors that can make the pricing work, setting it to 55% as the wholesale discount, you're going to see the most traction from bookstores that way. Some bookstores will still carry books at the low end, which is 35%, is what I believe it appears to authors as. To us, it appears as 20 or 25, I forget which. And some bookstores can do that. Some bookstores do. Sometimes bookstores will only do that for like special orders. So if the customer comes and asks us for it, we will order it in through iPage, which is our Ingram interface. But some of us just can't afford to stock it and have it on the shelves at that low of a discount because, again, we've got credit card fees, we've got rent, we've got lights, all of that fun stuff that we have to be able to pay for. And every line item we sell has to pay its rent in order for our business numbers to work.
That is potentially a hot take that getting your book into bookstores is not necessarily worth the time, effort, and money for an independent author. And I don't think a lot of people realize like how much money that they are potentially going to lose in that printing and then how much a store needs to make it worthwhile. Like I always remember working at a particular uh office supply retail giant, like we could see like how much like the percent that we made from each thing, and it's not as much as people think. And I mean, like paper made a ton, pens made a ton, but like books, computers, it's like nothing. And I don't think people realize that. They just see the high prices, like, oh, this is inflated, yada yada yada. But ooh, that is unfortunate. But so here's something I want to ask you because this popped up on Threads, and if you are on Threads, please follow the Golden Leaf Books at Golden Leaf Books. Fantastic. Shaunty goes into a lot of very detailed things on there that are incredibly helpful for every author. But recently, we saw something pop up about the debate between having your book as returnable versus non-returnable. What is your take on that? Because people had some feelings.
Very strong.
People have feelings, and those feelings are very justified feelings, right? Like it is terrifying as an indie author when they are going and seeing these stories where an indie bookstore ordered 10 of their books, sold 3 and returned 7, and that actually means that they owe Ingram money, right?
Ew.
And what's worse is if the indie bookstore had bought 4 of their books and returned 1 book, they would still owe Ingram money because of the way that that return setup works. For indie authors that are selling very high volume um, and getting a small number of returns, like if you are selling a couple hundred books a month and getting 1 or 2 returns, you're fine. You're still making a lot of money. It's still worth it. But if you are selling like 10 books a month on IngramSpark, it might not be worth the risk for you to allow an indie bookstore to return your books. It just doesn't work out a lot of the time. And I also do understand the indie bookstore side of it, right? In the book industry, it is very typical for the big publishers to allow us to do those ordering practices of ordering more than we will sell to make sure that we are selling as much as possible. And then we are allowed to return what we don't sell. And what we don't sell either gets resold later or it gets put into a system called the remainder distribution system,
Hmm.
which is a completely different setup than Ingram. The books are essentially like written off by the publisher. And so the discounts that you get when you're purchasing remaindered books are much bigger for the indie bookstore. My bookstore chooses to share a significant portion of that additional discount because we do those books as 50% off when we order remaindered books. Um, but there's a whole system set up for trad publishing to handle that particular part of the industry. But when it's indie authors and the books are print on demand and they don't have that storage set up in the Ingram warehouse for those returns, indie authors are setting the book to either be returned or shipped back to them. And that really affects the numbers on what the indie author ends up losing as a result of those returns. And
Now,
so,
can I ask you
sorry,
just
go ahead.
I just want to clarify something real quick. When we say returns, it doesn't just mean like, hey, this book was defective or damaged. Bookstores can return books just like if they have it sold, right? Like it's not just a, hey, this is damaged.
Right. Yes. I am not sure what happens with the indie author's fees
Hmm.
if we return a book for being damaged. But we are allowed to return a book just because it didn't sell within a certain time period.
Okay.
Most indie bookstores give it about 90 days. Some bookstores are doing 6 months. I think 12 months is like our upper limit for
Okay.
returns.
Okay. That's I think that helps put it into perspective of why it's so important when you're considering returnable versus non-returnable. Because I mean, I think most people think of it like, oh, I want to return it because this didn't work or it's broke or something like that. Not, oh, the store's gonna return it because it didn't sell, which I think plays into your previous points of, it's I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but it's risky to potentially put especially a debut novel into an indie bookstore unless you have a significant following for it already.
Yeah, it can definitely be a risk, and sometimes that risk doesn't make sense.
Ah, that's sad. But Beatrice, what do you got?
It is sad. I was just thinking about all of the things that we have talked about already that were really good. And another question that I had that I feel like it's going to be very beneficial for everyone to hear is like, what are your tips for authors to start contacting
Mm,
indie bookstores directly? I know one of the things that we talked about a lot has been like how to partner more with indie bookstores and how authors nowadays kind of like feel like Amazon is the only way and how that is not necessarily the case. So I love what you have to say about all of that. I don't know exactly the best way to ask about it, but that's in general it.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is checking the bookstore's website beforehand to make sure that you are following whatever policy they have for submissions. Some bookstores aren't able to process or handle that kind of like a, yeah, we'll take your book right now. If you just walk into the store and talk to the person at the register, that person's not always the owner. It's not always someone who can do the ordering. It's not always someone who has the time. Sometimes we're really busy and we need to be making our sales and supporting our customers that are buying the other books that we already have. And so that can be really stressful for us when we have someone walking in on the spot without ever having contacted us and trying to have that conversation in store. It can also be awkward if there are customers around to have a conversation about how much we're paying versus how much we're charging, and all of that information just being out there for everyone can be a little bit difficult to kind of navigate. So checking to see if the store has a policy, reaching out privately beforehand, always great. Obviously, we really appreciate if the author has supported our bookstore in the past, if it's a regular, we are much more likely to engage with you because that support can go both ways. But I do also have a little bit of a bone with some bookstores that like won't carry authors unless they have been a regular, because even if a big trad author is a local, you don't require them to be a regular in order to carry them in your store. It doesn't mean that the book won't sell just because they haven't been in your store before. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense to me as part of the business equation for it. And it especially doesn't make sense on the business equation of the indie author, because if you are buying something from every indie bookstore that you go to get your book put in, and then that bookstore, if we're doing well by an indie author, we are probably selling like 3 or 4 copies before we move on to the next thing, right? And so if you buy 1 or 2 books from us as part of the transaction, you have probably spent the royalty that you would have made from our sales. And so that's one of the ways that we need to kind of be cognizant of the fact that y'all are also businesses and it needs
Mhm.
to be a win-win situation.
What
Is
is like the no-no? Like the absolutely please don't do this when you're trying. Yeah, I
I
know
know
what
it's
I'm saying,
funny.
and I want to hear
No, it's funny. I
it.
was about to ask the exact opposite question. You were going to ask the worst thing you could do, and I was going to ask what's the best thing you could do.
So I'm going to start with the best thing you can do.
That's
And
fair.
then we'll go to the worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do is make it clear that you understand how the industry works on our side as well as yours, because that's one thing that can be intimidating for a lot of bookstores is we get a lot of indie authors that are super new and aren't aware of how our side of the industry works, which it is confusing. There's a lot to learn there. But they'll do things like tell us that we should stock their book by purchasing it from Amazon, right?
Mm.
And we can't purchase it from Amazon. And if you understood the basics of wholesale pricing, you would know why we can't purchase from Amazon to stock in our stores. So understanding that we need that wholesale discount, understanding the information that we need about your book in order to make our decision on it, and having something ready to kind of pitch that. That's the best thing that you can do to set yourself up, is just be aware of what the conversation is going to involve as you're going in. Now, my bookstore, we do our best to actually interact with indie authors and educate them as much as we can, but we're mostly able to do that because we're little and in a growth phase, right? But if we start getting overwhelmed and start getting hundreds of requests to carry books per month, we're not going to have time to be able to do that one-on-one,
Mhm.
which is part of the goal of like our threads and the education resources that we're putting out there, because then we can do it in mass instead of one-on-one, one at a time. Um, Now, the worst thing you can do, I kind of touched on a little bit. Don't mention Amazon. Uh, just like we have a lot of feelings about Amazon and the impact that it has had on indie bookstores over the past couple of decades, and the way that it is not a sustainable future for the publishing industry. I respect the way that it has democratized publishing and allowed for so many more indie authors and so many more books. Like, I love that. I love the increase in things to read. And because I love books, I wouldn't own a bookstore if I didn't love books, right? Um, but a monopoly is never a good long-term strategy for any industry. And so having a single retailer that is getting, estimates are somewhere between 60 and 85, 90% of all sales for an industry, that's scary. And that's dangerous, because if that crashes, if something goes wrong there, that is an entire industry that is just in turmoil as a result. And So yeah, we've got a lot of strong feelings and a lot of concerns about the future of our industry as a result of the market power that Amazon has. And legalese, I'm not saying that they are a monopoly. It just seems
Yeah.
like 60 to 80% of sales for an entire industry in an entire country seems really monopoly-ish,
hmm
is
I,
all I'm
I
saying.
would assume Barnes and Noble has a big enough share that legally no one's gonna take up that fight. Also, Amazon has $1 bajillion, gonna hire every lawyer in the world. So, what are you gonna do?
Yep.
Do you along those lines, do you have any suggestions for indie authors as to other revenue, no, not revenue, but like venues that they could use besides obviously the indie bookstores? Talk to your indie bookstores, approach them online first. Don't just show up with a book pile of books and say sell these. Like what else would you recommend to people?
So one of my favorites for a long time has been Kobo. Uh,
Hmm.
Kobo offers a subscription called Kobo Plus that essentially works just like Kindle Unlimited. The only difference is that they do not have the exclusivity clause. And the exclusivity clause with Kindle Unlimited means that your ebook cannot be anywhere else on the internet available for
Hmm.
download. It's not just that you can't sell it at other places. If your book is on Kindle Unlimited, you can't have it in libraries. You can't have it pirated and listed on a pirate website, or you are risking your entire Amazon account. So it's a pretty big impact. And Amazon was very strategic in the way that they did that. I actually argue that that is how Amazon built their portion of
Hmm.
the market to such a gargantuan amount, is that they realize the value that indie authors are bringing to the publishing industry and blocked off the rest of the market from being able to access that supply, right, of content. If we can't access 80% of the content being sold, how do we compete?
Yeah,
So that Kindle Unlimited exclusivity clause, I honestly think Congress should be doing something about it, first of all. But I also recognize that that limits some authors because there are little golden handcuffs that come with that.
hmm
Kindle Unlimited is how a lot of authors make their money. Now, one of the strategies that I see a lot of indie authors using is that they will put the first book or two on Kindle Unlimited, and then the rest of the series they will just sell outright, because that way people can try the series, and then if they like it, then they actually pay the full price for the ebooks.
that's
One
smart.
option that indie authors using that strategy could do is have the first few books on Kindle Unlimited and then the rest of the series in Kobo Plus. Because again, Kobo Plus does not have that exclusivity requirement. So you can still have the book for sale on Amazon as an ebook. It just isn't in the Kindle Unlimited subscription library.
That's that is actually quite brilliant.
Thank you. I spend a lot of time thinking about these things.
I love that.
I feel like we need more people thinking about these things because everyone's just like, yes, I gotta get on Amazon and I'm done. And they don't think about these other revenue or these other venues. And if authors would think about these other venues and readers would think about these other venues, we could slowly chip away at that Amazon monopoly. And I mean, I think in the long run that'd be better for everyone, except for Jeff Bezos. But you know, whatever. He's got plenty of
We
money.
don't want things
He
to
rented
go
an entire
good for
city in
him.
Italy for his wedding. He is fine.
Oh
So,
my God. Right. Well, and I think you said one really key thing there, slowly chipping
mm,
away. If we all boycotted Amazon and Amazon's ebook sales tanked overnight, that would actually be incredibly damaging to a portion of the industry because that is one of the things that causes the fallout that I mentioned of a monopoly collapsing.
mhm.
And in this case, indie authors would be the ones that would be seeing that impact, and it would be drastic and hard, and it would be hard for a lot of marginalized communities. So I think it being a slow move is really important. One of the things about that exclusivity clause that makes that slow move especially key is that indie authors with their books in Kindle Unlimited cannot just jump to another platform overnight. There is actually a term that you agree to when you add your book into Kindle Unlimited. It's 90 days where it has to stay exclusive. So even if you pull it out of Kindle Unlimited within that 90-day time frame, you still can't go upload it somewhere else, or you risk your Amazon account and
Jeez.
any revenue that they haven't paid out, and their payouts are relatively slow. I want to say it's like a 60-day turnaround time based on the month that it was paid in, something like that, right? So if all the readers left overnight, you have these authors that are stuck there for a couple of months for a lot. And one of the other portions of it that a lot of people don't realize when they don't read the fine print, because I've gone through and read the fine print on all these Amazon contracts multiple times, is that 90-day period auto renews. So
Ooh.
while it's not 90 days after you make your request to leave Kindle Unlimited, it could be up to 90 days for that to expire, because if you are, say, 110 days in when you go to pull out, you're back in another 90-day period. You've got another 80 days before that exclusivity expires again. At least that's based on my understanding. I'm not a lawyer. I don't do legal advice.
Yeah.
That's just how I understood the contracts, and that's how other people have confirmed their understanding.
That's so scary. That like it feels what you say, it feels like golden handcuffs. Like someone has you in like a chokehold. And I don't have my stuff in Kindle Unlimited, but I know people that do, and I can see how delicate they are in the way that they do things and how extremely intentioned they are in the way that they distribute their books and everything. And I can't fault people because it sounds very scary. I have seen on threads and I have seen like comments of people that got that thankfully blew up, but not so thankfully they had their stuff pirated and their entire Amazon accounts got closed because their books were pirated because they were on Kindle Limited and Amazon said fuck you.
Yeah. Fortunately, that is like a pretty rare occurrence, especially versus the amount of books that are actually pirated, but it does
Yeah.
happen. It's not a zero number of
Yeah.
times. And yeah, that would be devastating, especially given that Kindle Unlimited is the way that the majority of indie authors are making a majority of their
Yeah.
revenue.
So it seems like we kind of need to collectively change our mindset, both as authors and as readers. Because for background for anyone else that's watching this, like Storyforge is in the process of publishing a short story anthology. And we got some advice from a variety of people, and someone said to us, it doesn't really count as being published unless someone can go to Amazon and buy your book. And that is unfortunately how most people view it. And like that is a general consumer like point of view. And I think that's something that we need to start getting people to change in their minds. Like, just because you're not on Amazon does not mean that you are not a published author, does not mean that you haven't made it, you haven't produced a book that people are going to love. You know, it's just maybe it's only available in Barnes and Noble, maybe it's only available on your website, maybe it's only available through indie bookstores. Like, that is still fine. You are still a published author. No one can take that away from you. You're just not giving any money to Jeff fucking Bezos, who has all the money in the world. Piss off, Jeff Bezos.
We don't like that man in this house.
Yeah, not a fan, but I do also understand the way that the system is kind of set up,
Hmm.
right? To gear people towards that. And Amazon has done a very good marketing job. I hear all the time about people that will walk into a bookstore and think that the bookstore is Amazon owned somehow. And like it's just a rebrand of Amazon because they have so closely associated Amazon and bookstore that they don't realize that other book retailers actually exist, which was wild the first couple of times.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's so hard to wrap my head
That's
around
a
how that could
horrifying
happen.
thought.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
Well,
app online that I order all of my books through because Kindle, right? All books are Kindle. So therefore, all bookstores must be
you're
Kindle Unlimited.
frying my brain.
I mean, I feel like as we've made everything in life easier and more accessible, we have diluted the people's ability to think critically. And
Yes.
like that is an assumption that like my 5-year-old would have made. Like, oh, well, everything is available here, so everything is, Kindle. Like he would make that jump in logic. And it would make sense for a 5-year-old, but like from like someone who's in like 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, like you should probably know better than that. Like Jeff Bezos doesn't own everything in the world. He owns a lot, but not everything.
I think, especially talking about critical thinking, there is a question. This is a question that I wanted to ask because I also like feel like it's important to highlight this aspect of, I guess your career, Shanti. I don't know how to call it, but like I think a lot of the ways that people have not gotten to know who you are at Golden Leaf Books is and everything is through threads and all the educational content that you put there. And the super long threads that take you 2 hours to make because I read that post too. And I just wanted to, I don't know, ask you a little bit about that. What drove you to want to like educate people this way? What are things that I don't know, you wish people knew, all of those kinds of things. I feel like you have done a very important, good job at making people more aware of things that we didn't even know existed. And just that. I suck at asking questions. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's honestly info dumping for me. And my little neurodivergent brain gets
Yay.
by like talking like I know things. And while I'm generally pretty confident in the things that I say and I try to research, um, I just really enjoy sharing information and going off about my special interest, and books and publishing have just always been a hyper special interest for me. Like I was the kid in elementary school that spent a lot of recesses in the library helping the librarian like reshelve books and receive books and get all of those things taken care of so that the library could function because I enjoyed, you know, seeing all of the books and picking out the ones I wanted to be the first one to read. Um, and yeah, so the love of books started young and just never really stopped. Like I think my nickname on the playground was like dictionary girl.
Oh my god, we would have been friends.
Yeah, and like some of the first series of things that I did on Threads, like I tried like naming them and being cutesy because social media is basically throwing things at a wall and seeing what sticks, right?
Yep.
And one of them was definitions to counter the hot takes because I was so frustrated with people that were just so confidently wrong about certain things. And so, yeah, it's definitely my neurodivergence showing.
But I love that. It's your superpower. I don't know if you've seen the whole like joke of like the autism superpowers on social media that I don't know if you're aware to, but like the way that neurodivergency is usually portrayed like this very unrealistic way in media that it's like, wow, this person now can do super fast math with their head. It means they're autistic. And it's like, wow, you're really doing that. You're putting one and single thing to represent an entire group of people that are extremely different and are complex human beings to it. Okay, we will say that we have superpowers. Then that is your autism. uh my therapist was very puzzled when I told him that existed. I think it's a good superpower to be able to like sit down and focus on like giving information on people. And I've seen because I stalk you, obviously. Uh, I've seen it, like very good feedback from people like reacting to it and being like, "Wow, shit, I didn't know this. Oh, I'll do better." Or, "Oh, I'm glad that now I have this piece of information. Oh, this just saved probably a bad decision that I would have taken." And I think in this day and age that everything is trying to be moved so fast, everything is trying to be shortened, everything is trying to be automated and everything. We do need more people that are taking the time, sitting down and being like, hey, this is how things are. Before you do anything, make sure that you are actually making an informed decision. And I wanted to highlight that aspect of you because I feel it's very important.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of one of the recent dramas on Threads that was
Which
super
one?
for me. Uh, which I don't know if you guys saw the thing with Matthew and Paul and
Yep.
Great Penguin Book.
That they were gonna
Unfortunately,
like create
ate
their own
all
publishing
of that
house.
content.
Yeah,
Ugh.
and I got messaged by a bunch of customers last year. Was the first time that we saw their type of content coming, and we were very sympathetic, wanted to reach out and get them in our store, and very quickly realized the actual reason that the bookstore wasn't willing to work with them. Which was that the terms that they wanted to give bookstores didn't make any sense for how bookstores operate. I mentioned earlier that if a bookstore sells 3 copies of an indie published book, we're probably doing fairly well with that indie author.
Hmm.
Um, they had a minimum order set up of 100 books.
Ooh.
They had a couple titles, right? So you could like break it in a combination, but it was 100 book order minimum.
Which
And
I can't think about any author in the world, no matter how prolific or how famous they are, that a single bookstore would just order 100 books of them.
not when I've only got 1,000 square foot retail, right? If I'm Barnes and Noble, yeah, I might have 100 copies of the current bestseller, but I'm not Barnes and Noble. I'm a little indie bookstore. And so for me, my first order, I usually only order 1 copy to start. If I'm ordering direct from an indie author, I try to do 4 books if they're going to have to ship them to me, just to make the shipping numbers and the royalties and everything work for that indie author. But there's no way we're doing 100. And they weren't set up on IngramSpark and didn't really seem to know about it. Um, and so when it came out a few weeks, months, weeks, it was definitely a few weeks ago that they were trying to get into Amazon Wholesale for distribution instead of doing the IngramSpark printing. And the way that they were kind of conflating and claiming things about Ingram and then coming after that Ingram employee that we all love, Emily at Ingram Sparks. Like,
We love you, Emily.
yeah, it was just, it was so much misinformation. And I was just like, this is everything I've been talking about and like trying to not have be a thing anymore. And then you have these people with this giant platform saying things that are incredibly wrong about the industry. And it was rough, man.
I mean, that's a symptom of our current society. The more followers you have, the more right you are in everyone's eyes. Because you have 1 million followers, so you must know what you're talking about. Whereas we all know that doesn't mean shit. So,
Yep. Well, and like we won't carry that penguin book as a result, but we did order in and Tango makes 3 after all of that happened. So, gay penguins.
We love gaping wings.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like all of these conversations are so important to have. I'm thinking about threads and like how people are so confidently wrong and all of that, and the need of more people. I was I was gonna say almost like taking the bullet in like actually speaking out in informing other people. Because I feel like the problem that we have right now with the specifically online in the author industry, specifically probably in places like Threads, Instagram, and TikTok, is like the whole like witch hunting situation, or the whole like the people that are confidently wrong are very loud. And there obviously has to be a level of like, I'm not gonna say like fighting against it, because like fighting seems like such a harsh word, but like I guess standing, I don't know, touching grass and being like, hey, let's just talk about this for a second before we overreact about something and maybe doesn't need the overreaction. But doing that also makes you a target for the people that are overreacting, and like maybe like go and have to tell you things that now you have to deal with. Which I don't know if that has happened to you, because I usually don't go in the comments of the threads that you do. I just read the threads and like repost them and everything. But like, have you ever had to like actually set time aside to deal with people in consequence of you trying to educate like people in like this community and industry?
Yeah, there have been a couple times where I have, and like I said earlier, I talk very assertively. I talk in the positive. Um, and so it comes off like, yes, I am definitely the one that is right and I know everything. And that is something that I've like struggled with my whole life. But when I get someone coming back and saying, hey, this is actually inaccurate, like you actually are the one that got something wrong. Like a couple weeks ago, I did a post on editing, and um I got something wrong in that, and I had a bunch of editors being like, actually dev edits are more expensive than line edits. um and cool, I was wrong. That's totally fine. I can be wrong as a human, right? And I think part of what a lot of people do in reaction to being told that they're wrong is they escalate and
Hmm.
they go harder and double down. But my approach has generally been like, oh, yeah, no, you're right. I was wrong. Um, my bad. And that tends to work pretty well. There are times where I've done some of those long form posts and I've put in a ton of research and I still get something wrong. And it will sometimes be something so basic about the situation that I have to take my whole post down, because I, the way that threads works, like you can't edit it after a certain amount of time. And also, if you post a correction in the comments, that's not going to show up on that first thread. And so everybody is still seeing that first thread. And so I've had to like come up with my standard of like, here's when I will take a thread down if I think it's going to like actively hurt someone as a result of this misinformation. If I think I'm going to lead someone to make a bad choice, then I will take the thread down if there's the potential of that happening. And I will usually make a post explaining, hey, I had to take this thread down because I was wrong. Here is what I was wrong about. And then I usually also try to tag like the primary person correcting me and thank them for correcting me, because you can't fix problems that you don't see. And I've always gotten a positive response as a result of that. The other thing that I do is, if I'm seeing a lot of people that I really respect saying something and I'm the one that feels like I have the hot take, I usually sit with it for a while before responding. And I read through multiple threads. Like the old internet adage, lurk more,
Hmm.
lurk so much, y'all. Like, and I will hold off and wait and kind of see like, hey, I'm feeling this way. Am I being defensive because of an internal bias? Because I was raised very hardcore conservative, and it has taken a lot of unpackaging to come out and not be that person. Um, and I say hardcore conservative, I mean, I was raised with a lot of internalized biases, right? Um, and so I always try and do a double check first to see, like, is this work that I need to be doing? And also, I have a policy where I do my best to not contradict marginalized voices as a platform. Like, it is finding the common ground where I agree with them and where I support them. And that is the part that I will voice. And my disagreements I sit with and I think about and I research, and I usually end up being wrong. So, I'm just really grateful that I learned that from a young age on the internet.
I mean, I think that's a very, unfortunately, novel concept that, you take time to research and learn that and apologize when you're wrong, as opposed to, doubling down, getting louder, ignoring people. Like, more people should take that approach. But, it's the internet. What are we gonna do? So I think on that note, we're going to wrap up here. So if anyone's interested in following some of these threads that we've been talking about, you can follow Shaunty and Golden Leaf Books at Golden Leaf Books on Threads, on TikTok, on Instagram, and I think you guys are on Facebook too. They do have pictures of their mascot, Alistair Growley, on Instagram, which I highly recommend. He is an adorable dog.
I
But
met him. He's so cute, and I kiss his face.
He's such a sweet boy.
But otherwise, the educational content is primarily on Threads. So, Shanti, we really want to thank you for coming on here. It was great to talk to you. Hopefully, everyone watching learned a lot. We learned a lot, even though we've already talked to you before. We learned even more today, and we follow your threads. Hopefully, everyone out there will follow you as well, and also check out goldenleafbooks.com. So,
Yay.
guess on that note, publishers behaving badly. It's not you. It's